Parks and Recreation. We are so glad you are here. This is really your Parks and Recreation system, right? We would prefer to run it with your input. So thanks for showing up. And I'm going to introduce our Planning and Ecological Services Manager, Jeff Haley. He's going to talk to you more about what a master plan is and how we'll use it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I'm actually going to move over here because with our COVID pandemic, we have certain ways of doing things. We're doing a live, I don't know if it's live, but it's a web video so that we'll post this online. So the folks that aren't necessarily comfortable or couldn't attend this evening, they actually watched the whole presentation from home. So I think I'm in the right camera here. So anyway, if you guys see me kind of awkwardly moving around, that's what I'm trying to do. So just to get started, we're going to do a quick welcome and introduction around the room of just all the staff that are here. And then we'll probably spend about 15, maybe 20 minutes this evening just doing a brief presentation. Our goal is simply to make sure you guys all know what we know as we get into the master plan. In other words, trying to build that foundation of knowledge and understanding so that as we're asking you questions and we're trying to get feedback, that you guys have some of that framework that we know about as well. So just to get started, Regina Elsner is our project manager. She's one of our planners. So is Tina Briggs. She's a planner with us. Charlotte O'Donnell's in the back. She's one of our staff that works on strategic initiatives with our team. We have Caitlin Bearby Smith, who's with our historic and cultural assets in the red. And then Ellen Pesic is one of our assistant foresters, primarily with our forestry team. Dennis Warrington is in the back. He's our urban parks manager. And then Stephanie Monroe is our regional facilities manager. So if you think about our golf course, our reservoir, Valmont Park, she manages those. Christy Spielman is our data analyst, GIS analyst. So she's probably the smartest one in the room if you have really detailed questions. So, well, I mean, everybody's smart. But Brian Beery is our community partnerships and connections manager. And so he is over with our rec facilities and wellness and that sort of thing. And then Allie already introduced herself. So just so you know who's in the room, and you may have heard a little bit of who you might want to chat with in a moment. Let's see here. And then the most important thing is you. So we understand you'd rather be, or you could be somewhere else this evening playing tennis or pickleball or any other number of activities that you might enjoy. But you took time to be here this evening, and we certainly appreciate that. This really is, as Allie mentioned, this is your Parks and Rec department. We are here for you, for Boulder, and so this master plan is your master plan. That's what tonight is about, for you to help us understand what the community's needs and desires are. So that's really important, and we appreciate you took time to be here. We do have a team of consultants, primarily led by Design Workshop. So just know that a lot of the research and data isn't necessarily just staff coming up with stuff. A lot of it is from professionals and experts that we've hired to help analyze different activities, different sports, different needs. They're not here this evening, but they are a team that we can certainly thread in and introduce you to as well if you'd like. So that's the team. That's the introduction. And again, we appreciate the participation this evening. Does anybody here know what a master plan is? Anybody feel free to say something? No idea? Okay. No, staff can't answer. The master plan, that's what we're doing now. And it really is that long-term strategic guidance for our team, for the department. And so what that does is it sets the course for our department, and it's really founded on the goals that you all have as a community, our city council, our Parks and Rec Advisory Board. And it's really that guiding document that really tells us what our role is, what are the things we should be doing, what the things are that we shouldn't be doing, who do we serve, and how do we serve them. So if you kind of think about, okay, well, what does that mean? Since our last master plan in 2014, we've done a variety of things. And now we're updating that plan to really say, okay, what's next? So we've built a lot of facilities, a new pool, a reservoir center. We're working on our golf course. We've updated parks and playgrounds. We've built the civic park. We've done a tremendous amount of programming and services. We've been better refined about how we serve people and who we serve with subsidies and financial aid, started new programs and that sort of thing. So that's really what's coming out of these master plans. In fact, about 63% of the actions that we had identified in the last master plan had been completed, I think as of 2019 when we did this snapshot. And so it really does build strategies about our day-to-day operations, the investments, capital projects, what do we need more of, what do we need to build. It also looks at equitable access, like who are those folks that we might not be serving. You guys are here because you might already participate. There may be a whole wealth of folks in our community that don't have access or don't even know about it. So we want to find out how we serve them. And then really looking at how we do that sustainably with our finances. You'll hear later about we have limited resources, just like everybody these days. And how do we really put those resources where they're most needed and intended. So you can see here from 2014 to 19, we've reduced our backlog, 60% of the backlog that we have in our facilities. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, not on the tennis courts, So that's what we're here to talk about, okay? So we'll talk through that. You guys have activities to tell us those things in a moment. Jump to the point, Joe. So how do we go through this process? This is really, we started actually last year. The COVID pandemic has certainly had an impact with this process. We hope to be started a year ago in March of 2020. But we started initially with some research and trends. That's why this evening you're going to see a lot of data. You're going to hear Regina talk about a lot more interesting things than I'm talking about here in a moment. But that's a lot of the key information we're looking at. And we are here standing on our head, obviously, trying to figure out what the needs are. So we've looked at research, we've understood, we've had surveys, we've done benchmarking, all these different tactics to look at what do other cities have, what does our community think, where are we deficient? And so that's really gathering the needs assessment. As we move forward, you're probably thinking, okay, well, when do we start doing things? Our goal is by this time, May of 22, next spring, summer, to really have a final plan. So the needs assessment moves directly into that implementation. So we think a need is this, we need this. How do we implement that? How do we get that? How do we get the funding? How do we set up the strategies? But that's, again, tonight is really how do we hear from you all, the community, but then also through this whole process. And when I say this is your master plan, it really is yours. When we go to PRAB, our Parks and Rec Board, hey, Jeff, Regina, what did the community say? What do they think about that? Those are always the questions that we'll get. City Council, what does the community feel? What do they need? So we've done a lot of outreach. I'm not going to go through great detail, but we do have some stakeholders we've worked with, key members of the community that we work with on a regular basis that we feel really have a pulse on some of these topics. Questionnaires, polls, surveys. If nothing else this evening, please take a moment to figure out how you can be involved. Or if you're thinking, man, that was a great present, I want to tell so-and-so. There's all kinds of resources online. We'll have more meetings. Youth education outreach. Our kids, our teens, like that's part of our population. We highly focus on that group as well. We've worked with children in schools, high schoolers in Fairview, Boulder High, et cetera. So we're targeting that outreach too, so we hear from everyone, as well as our underserved communities. Folks, maybe there's a language barrier, or maybe they work in the evenings, they can't be here tonight. So we're really reaching out in all different ways. And that's what we hope the community understands. When we say this is your master plan, it is our, the whole community. So we want to hear from you. And so how does that work? A master plan, really, we take a kind of a three-pronged approach. And I'm not going to get into this too detail. But if you think about, well, how does this all get sorted out? Who makes decisions? How do you know what's right? We try to look at things through like three different lenses. Our policy directive, Parks and Rec Advisory Board, City Council, they're the ones that are elected. They're the ones that really shape the policy. Here's what we think. Here's what we understand. Research, benchmark, surveys, gap analysis, mapping, data. And then here's you guys, community engagement. So we need to hear from the community. And we really have a special focus on all of that related to resilience and equity. And so those are two big words that really shape and kind of form an umbrella over all this. And so how do we remain resilient to financial challenges, environmental challenge, we're about to have a storm, whatever the case might be, those decisions we make, are they creating a resilient framework that we can use and kind of withstand any of those pressures that might come, pandemic, flood, budget challenges, staffing, or those kind of things. And equity, probably most importantly. Are we being equitable in our community and how we're serving people? How, fees or hours of operation or the types of facilities or the way things are printed even and how people can read those sorts of equity topics as well. So that's what forms our master plan. That's how we're approaching this situation. And so right before I turn it to Regina, who's going to get into a little more detail, I want to also mention there's a concurrent process that we're also working on related to our historic assets. And you might say, well, Jeff, why are you all of a sudden talking about historic places? We don't have a strategic plan for our historic and cultural places. These are very important to us, very important to the community. And so we're hip at the historic places plan. That's our little, okay, nobody laughed. But anyway, it's not cool. So I wanted to mention that. We're actually kind of doing these projects combined. So this is just kind of one key focus area that we actually have a station here this evening, and I mentioned Caitlin a minute ago. So that's a process you'll see running concurrently with this. We have many different historic areas. You might recognize the Bandshell, the Mall, Chautauqua, many of these great places. You may have done some work at the Pottery Lab. And so we're also talking to the community about that. Why are these important? Do you know about them? How could they be better used and really preserved in our community? So I just want to mention that specifically. Okay, enough from me. Regina's here to take it over, and then we'll get going.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I just want to start this evening with a couple of words about sort of the inventory of assets that we have within BPR. So currently, Boulder Parks and Recreation manages more than 1,800 acres of urban parkland and 138,000 square feet of recreation center space, plus many other recreation facilities like the Boulder Reservoir, Belmont Bike Park, and the Flatirons Golf Course. BPR is one of many providers of recreation programs in the Boulder community. And before the pandemic, we actually partnered with recreation and sports enthusiasts to provide over 2,500 different types of programs. Some programs include a fee, while others are subsidized to ensure that all members of the community have access to parks and recreation. As part of the first phase of the project that Jeff kind of talked about, we have our research and trends phase. We identified a few trends for this project that we want to keep in mind as we move forward. BPR, along with other parks and recreation departments across the country, will need to adapt and become more resilient, planning to be more agile and strengthen our partnerships with our community agencies, private sector providers, volunteer groups, and residents to ensure that our critical community assets, including our recreation programs and services, continue to serve Boulder far into the future. And these are some of those things that we are trying to keep in mind throughout this process. The first thing I want to talk to you a little bit about today is taking care of what we have. Boulder is growing in population. High levels of use, including from some surrounding communities, are resulting in overcrowding and sometimes overuse of our facilities. As you can see here, even with constructing parks on our currently undeveloped land, we won't be keeping up with the demand we estimate between now and 2040. We estimate, kind of projecting out with population numbers, that we will need over 200 additional acres of land for parks by 2040 to keep up with that population growth. Buying that many acres in a city like Boulder may not be feasible. Some alternatives to meet that high demand include renewal, or looking at how we increase the frequency of replacement of our assets. Resilience, building amenities that have higher capacity and higher tolerance for that increased use. Equity, improving access for those who need it most, and improving the balance of services across the city. And finally, repurposing, changing what is being provided based on trends and demand. Those are all alternatives for meeting those high demands. As you can see here, community members who responded to our survey overwhelmingly supported maintaining, renovating, and enhancing existing facilities when given the choice of how to spend $100. Those activities were actually allocated almost $2 for every single dollar allocated to acquiring more land or constructing new facilities. In many of our interactions with the community, providing safe, clean, and welcoming spaces is a top priority. Public spaces, including our parks, are available to all. Illegal and dangerous behaviors threaten those spaces and strain already limited resources. It's imperative that we work with the community to find solutions that address everyone's needs. The health and well-being of the entire community remains a top priority and part of our mission at Boulder Parks and Recreation. A majority of community members responding to that same survey indicated that providing these types of programs are essential or very important for Boulder Parks and Recreation. The challenges facing each group are unique and will require an integrated approach to ensure that all needs are being met. When we compare ourselves to peer communities, what Jeff mentioned called benchmarking, both within the state and nationally, Boulder kind of fluctuates where we rank as it relates to these various recreational facilities. Community members, though, indicate generally being satisfied with the facilities that we do offer. But we also know that there are certain types of facilities that may be lacking in our system. So we need your input to help us determine how we balance those two things. Since 2016, BPR's funding has remained mostly flat, actually averaging a decrease of under 0.5% annually. BPR has increased our cost recovery methodically since 2014, which means increasing our fees to cover the cost of providing those programs. We've done that to address the overall cost increases, but fees are still not funding all of our expenses, and community members are increasingly expressing concerns about our high fees. Looking into the future, specifically 2022 to 2026, the funding the department anticipates bringing in will only support slight increases to our existing expenses at about the rate of inflation. Through our many different planning processes, we've identified a number of big investment projects that will well exceed the projected funding for the department. And you can see that here in the red above that black revenue line. In 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency, pushing departments to work towards meeting specific climate goals, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. BPR works in sustainability through our forestry and natural lands programs, as well as our responsible development, operation, and maintenance of our facilities. There remains more we can and should do to address our impacts on the climate emergency. Parks and protected natural areas are becoming even more important in preventing the worst impacts and damages of climate change. Colorado, and by extension Boulder's racial and ethnic demographics, will continue to change now and into the future. City Council recently adopted the Racial Equity Plan to guide each department's efforts to address systemic and institutional racism. These tangible goals are echoed by the community's expressed hope that BPR provides programs, services, and facilities that everyone has equitable access to and feels welcome in. BPR is committed to this work and continuing to collaborate across the city to address systemic and institutional racism. With that, that's a very brief overview of the various topics that we've got around the room tonight. I'm going to hand it over to Tina to walk you through sort of our next steps.
Thank you, Regina. So the first thing I want to let you all know is everything that we've done here tonight, I know they've said it once before, but we're going to have it online. So we're taping this, so they'll get the same presentation. Each of the activities we're also going to put together digitally, so there'll be a way to do that. So we're going to leave those available to you till July 5th. So please tell everybody that couldn't be here. We'll be sending it out via social media again and things like that, but go ahead and please help us spread the word. BPRmasterplan.org is the easiest place to go. You'll be able to click and link on all of the activities of the video. It's on the bottom of every single board, and it should be super easy to Google. If you go to Parks and Recreation, there's a button right there on the main page to get you there. So, upcoming engagement. We're taking all of this information and we'll be putting it together and doing summaries of the public engagement to share with our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board on July 12th. We'll follow that with our presentation to City Council on the 27th. So what you don't see here tonight is, like Jeff talked about, we have lots of targeted outreach that are going on as well. So this is kind of open to that general public. We've done a lot of youth engagement. I've got engagement coming up with the unhoused people in our community, as well as some activities in our Spanish-speaking communities to make sure that we're hearing from a really broad spectrum. So now's the fun part. So we've got stations all over the room, lots of activities. So don't get overwhelmed by the activities. You're welcome to join in them. We'd love to hear from you, but if it rather just sparks conversation, there's lots of ways to give us input, right? We have some flip charts, there's comment cards. If you'd rather do a little bit more discreetly, post-it notes, however you'd like to. So we like to see things in writing, partly because we don't always have a perfect memory. So putting it in writing is one of the best ways to make sure we capture your exact thoughts. I can kind of quickly run around the room. This is our historic places plan. We have our safe and welcoming places back there, taking care of what we have, our recreation facilities, community health and wellness, and then our financial sustainability. And finally, we have key themes. So in our early public engagement, we have 6 key themes from our previous master plan. And as Jeff was talking about with resilience and equity, we heard from the community in that engagement that it's really important that those are actually infused in every one of our key themes. So we actually have a worksheet, homework if you want, to really help us understand what your perspective is and how resiliency and equity are BPR's role in each of those key themes. So I think that's a little bit thought-provoking and probably is more than you can do in a quick exercise. So feel free to take a worksheet home, or if you want to fill it out tonight, it'll also be online. So we also have new ideas, right? So there might be something that you're thinking about that just isn't on any of these boards. Please feel free, use that last board to give us all of your new ideas. So with that, I'm going to leave our contacts up here. You'll also see our contacts on the bottom of the comment card. And I'm going to let you go ahead and get up and spread around the room in the thing that is most important and make your way around the room. And thank you so much.